Think of the impossible and go get it is not just a title. It is a challenge to the way most people have been taught to think about life, success, struggle, and personal limits. From the beginning, people are surrounded by invisible boundaries. Some are created by family expectations. Some come from society. Some come from fear, failure, rejection, and past disappointment. Over time, these limits become beliefs. Then those beliefs become identity. Many people stop trying, not because they are incapable, but because they have accepted a smaller version of themselves. This book is written for the person who feels there is more inside them than what their current life shows. It is for the person who has dreams that seem too large for their circumstances. It is for the one who has failed before, been doubted, been delayed, or felt stuck. It is also for the person who has already achieved something, but knows they have not yet reached their full potential. The purpose of this book is not to sell fantasy. It is not built on empty motivation or unrealistic promises. This is a reality-based journey into what it truly takes to pursue difficult goals. It is about understanding fear, building discipline, surviving setbacks, managing uncertainty, and developing the mindset required to keep moving when progress feels slow. Thinking of the impossible is easy. Many people dream. Few act. Fewer continue when things become painful. The real difference between people who stay ordinary and people who create extraordinary results is not luck or talent alone. It is the willingness to stay committed long after excitement fades. This book will explore how great change actually happens. Not through sudden miracles, but through small daily actions repeated with patience and honesty. It will show why failure is not always defeat, why discomfort is often necessary, why consistency matters more than mood, and why the mind must be trained before the world begins to respond. Every chapter is designed to move deeper into the real process of building something meaningful from nothing. You will not only be inspired, but also confronted with truths that are often ignored. Because growth does not happen when a person hears what feels good. Growth happens when a person faces what is true and chooses to act anyway. The impossible has always belonged to people who refuse to stop at what was visible. The distance between where you are and where you want to be is not only measured by time. It is measured by courage, effort, patience, sacrifice, and your ability to continue when results are not immediate. This journey begins with one decision. The decision to stop accepting limits that no longer serve you. The decision to stop waiting for perfect timing. The decision to move toward the life you know is possible, even if nobody around you understands it yet. This book begins there, with the belief that your current reality is not your final reality, and that the impossible may simply be the next thing waiting. Chapter 1. The impossible is usually a name given to fear. Most people do not fail because they are incapable. They fail because they stop at the edge of discomfort and call that edge reality. The mind is quick to protect itself. It wants safety. It wants certainty. It wants familiar routines, even when those routines are making life smaller. This is why many dreams die before they are even tested. Not because they were impossible, but because fear was given the authority to make decisions. The word impossible sounds final. It sounds like a wall. It sounds like a truth that cannot be argued with. But in most real situations, impossible is not a fact. It is a feeling. It is the emotional reaction that appears when effort becomes demanding and outcomes are uncertain. Fear often disguises itself as logic. It tells people that they are being practical. It tells them to wait for the right time. It tells them they need more support, more confidence, more money, more approval, more certainty. These thoughts feel intelligent because they protect comfort. But comfort is rarely where transformation begins. A person who wants to change their life must first understand that fear is not proof. Fear is information. It tells you that something matters. It tells you that you are stepping beyond what feels safe. But it does not tell you what is actually possible. That answer only comes through movement. The first battle in achieving difficult goals is not with the outside world. It is with the stories inside your own mind. These stories are often old. They come from childhood, past failures, criticism, rejection, and comparison. They become quiet beliefs that shape every decision. A person may say they want success, but deep inside, they may still believe they are not the kind of person who succeeds. That belief silently controls action. This is why mindset is not just motivation. It is structure. It is the system of thoughts that determines whether you continue when things become hard. When people see someone successful, they often notice the visible result and ignore the invisible process. They see the business, the confidence, the achievement, the recognition. They do not see the months of uncertainty, the private doubts, the repeated mistakes, the nights of frustration, or the discipline required to keep going without external reward. Every major achievement begins with a stage where nothing looks promising. This stage is where most people quit. The reason is simple. Results are delayed, but effort is immediate. The human mind struggles when it gives energy and receives no proof. That is where faith in process becomes necessary. Believing in possibility does not mean pretending everything will be easy. It means understanding that difficulty is part of progress, not evidence that you should stop. There is a difference between fantasy and bold thinking. Fantasy ignores reality. Bold thinking studies reality and still chooses to stretch beyond it. A person who wants something meaningful must learn to accept struggle without turning it into self-doubt. For example, consider someone who wants to start a business with very little money. At first, everything feels against them. They do not know where to begin. Others may not take them seriously. Their first attempts may fail. But if they learn, adapt, and continue, they begin to build momentum. Over time, what once felt unreachable becomes a system they understand. The business may not look like the original dream at first, but progress creates confidence. Action creates clarity. Another example is personal recovery after failure. A person may face public embarrassment, financial loss, or rejection that damages their confidence. For months, they may feel like they have lost direction. But if they use that period to rebuild habits, improve emotional control, and strengthen their thinking, the same failure can become the foundation of their strongest future. The pain does not disappear, but it becomes useful. This is one of the hardest truths in life. Your greatest limitations are often not external barriers. They are internal agreements you have made with fear. Some people agree to stay small because failure would feel embarrassing. Some agree to settle because trying again feels exhausting. Some agree to silence because speaking up feels risky. These decisions feel small in the moment, but over years, they shape an entire life. To think beyond the impossible, you must first become honest about where fear has been making choices for you. You must notice the excuses that sound reasonable, but are really avoidance. You must identify the places where you have accepted less than what you know you are capable of. This honesty can be uncomfortable. It forces you to confront habits, relationships, distractions, and beliefs that have kept you stagnant. But honesty is where freedom begins. A powerful life is not built by people who never feel fear. It is built by people who stop treating fear like authority. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is disciplined movement in the presence of fear. The impossible begins to shrink the moment you stop worshiping certainty. You do not need a guarantee before you begin. You need willingness. You need patience. You need enough self-respect to believe that your current struggle does not define your final destination. There will be moments when progress feels invisible. There will be moments when people doubt you, misunderstand you, or leave you. There will be moments when you question yourself. These moments are not signs that your goal is too big. They are signs that you are in the part of the journey that requires character. Character is built in repetition. It is built in choosing discipline when motivation is gone. It is built in keeping promises to yourself when nobody is watching. It is built in staying focused when distractions offer easier rewards. The impossible is often only impossible for the version of you that exists today. But you are not fixed. You can become stronger, wiser, more focused, more skilled, and more resilient than you are now. That is the beginning of everything. The day you stop asking whether something is too hard and start asking what version of yourself is required to achieve it, your life changes. Because impossible is not always a wall. Sometimes it is simply a door that only opens after you. Chapter 2. Most people lose before they begin because they wait for perfect conditions. One of the biggest reasons people never achieve difficult goals is not lack of talent or opportunity. It is the habit of waiting. Waiting for the right mood. Waiting for confidence. Waiting for support. Waiting for more money. Waiting for the perfect time. Waiting for a sign that removes all uncertainty. This habit feels harmless because it often looks responsible. A person tells themselves they are preparing. They say they are being careful. They believe they are planning. But in reality, many people use preparation as a way to avoid risk. They stay in the comfort of possibility because possibility is safe. Once action begins, excuses disappear and truth becomes visible. The truth is that perfect conditions do not exist. Life does not pause until you feel ready. It keeps moving. Time keeps passing. Responsibilities grow. Energy changes. Opportunities shift. A person who keeps waiting for the perfect moment usually reaches a point where regret becomes heavier than fear. The idea that success begins after certainty is one of the most dangerous beliefs a person can carry. Certainty is often the reward of action, not the starting point. Think about any major decision in life. Starting a business, changing careers, rebuilding after loss, learning a difficult skill, improving health, leaving a toxic situation, speaking up for yourself. None of these begin with full confidence. They begin with discomfort. They begin with incomplete information. They begin when the outcome is still unclear. This is why action is powerful. Action breaks illusion. It replaces imagination with evidence. It gives you feedback. It shows you what works and what does not. Without action, the mind creates exaggerated fear because it has no real experience to balance it. A person who never starts often believes their fear is wisdom. They tell themselves they are being realistic. But realism is not the same as surrender. Realism means understanding the difficulty and moving anyway with strategy. Many people spend years mentally rehearsing a better life without ever taking the first uncomfortable step. They want change, but they want change without disruption. They want growth without uncertainty. They want results without the emotional cost of becoming different. That is not how meaningful progress works. Growth always asks for something. It asks for time. It asks for patience. It asks for temporary discomfort. It asks you to become unfamiliar with your old self. This is difficult because the mind likes identity, even when that identity is limiting. A person who has been stuck for years may unconsciously protect their stuckness because it is familiar. Even pain can feel safer than uncertainty if it has become predictable. That is why the first step matters so much. The first step is not powerful because it solves everything. It is powerful because it breaks the pattern of hesitation. It tells your mind that movement is possible. The first step may look small. It may be making the phone call you had delayed. It may be beginning the course you keep saving for later. It may be waking up earlier. It may be exercising for 15 minutes. It may be writing one page. It may be sending your work to someone for feedback. These actions seem ordinary, but they are not small in effect. They change identity. Identity changes through repeated proof. Every time you do what you said you would do, even in a small way, you build trust with yourself. That trust becomes momentum. Momentum becomes confidence. Confidence becomes resilience. People often misunderstand confidence. They think confident people feel sure before they act. In reality, most confidence is built after surviving uncertainty multiple times. Confidence is memory. It is the memory of previous effort, previous discomfort, and previous survival. For example, consider someone who wants to improve their health after years of neglect. They may feel overwhelmed by how far they have fallen behind. They may compare themselves to fitter people and feel discouraged. If they wait until they feel inspired, they may never begin. But if they start with daily walks, better sleep, and simple meals, the body begins to respond. Energy improves. Mood improves. Self-respect returns. The early steps seem small, but they create a new direction. Another example is someone who wants to speak publicly or share their work. Fear of judgment can feel intense. They may delay for years because they think they need to be perfect first. But the person who begins speaking, writing, or sharing despite imperfection learns faster than the person who stays silent. With repetition, what once caused anxiety becomes manageable. Skill replaces fear. The biggest trap in waiting is that it creates the illusion of future control. A person tells themselves they will start later when things calm down. But later often brings new problems. Life rarely becomes simpler on its own. More often, delay increases pressure. The longer you postpone something meaningful, the heavier it becomes emotionally. You begin carrying the weight of what you are not doing. That weight turns into guilt, frustration, and reduced self-belief. Over time, the dream itself begins to feel painful because it reminds you of inaction. This is why beginning matters more than brilliance. Most successful people did not begin because they were sure. They began because staying still became more painful than moving forward. There is a hidden power in imperfect starts. Imperfect starts create real experience. Real experience creates better decisions. Better decisions create progress. Progress creates emotional strength. Waiting feels safe in the short term, but it is expensive in the long term. If you want to change your life, there comes a point where thinking is no longer useful without action. Reflection matters. Planning matters. Learning matters. But eventually, movement becomes the only honest answer. You do not need to feel fearless before you begin. You need to decide that fear is no longer a valid reason to stay where you are. Your future is not built by what you hope to do one day. It is built by what you are willing to begin while conditions are still imperfect. Because the truth is simple. Most people do not lose because the dream was too big. They lose because they kept waiting for a version of life that was. Chapter 3. Discipline is the bridge between vision and reality. A dream can inspire you for a moment, but discipline is what carries you when the excitement disappears. This is one of the hardest truths for people to accept. Many love the idea of success. Few are willing to live the daily structure that success demands. Vision is important because it gives direction. It helps you see beyond your current circumstances. It creates emotional energy. It gives meaning to effort. But vision alone is fragile. When life becomes difficult, inspiration fades quickly. Discipline is what remains when emotion becomes unreliable. Most people build their goals around feelings. They work when they feel motivated. They rest when they feel tired. They delay when they feel uncertain. They stop when they feel discouraged. This creates an unstable life because feelings change constantly. A person who depends only on motivation will always be inconsistent. Motivation is useful, but it is temporary. It rises and falls with sleep, stress, mood, and external events. Discipline is different. Discipline is a decision repeated until it becomes identity. Discipline is not punishment. It is self-respect in action. It is the ability to do what matters, even when comfort pulls you in another direction. It is the quiet choice to protect your future from your present impulses. This is what separates people who keep dreaming from people who actually build something. One group waits for energy. The other creates systems. Systems matter because they remove unnecessary decisions. When a person decides in advance how they will use their time, what habits they will protect, and what standards they will follow, they reduce emotional negotiation. They stop wasting mental energy arguing with themselves. Most failure does not come from lack of knowledge. It comes from broken routines. People usually know what would improve their life. They know they should sleep better, learn consistently, manage money carefully, exercise regularly, speak honestly, and stay focused. The challenge is not information. The challenge is repetition. Repetition is where most people lose patience. They want visible results quickly. They want proof that effort is working. But many meaningful outcomes take time to become visible. This delay creates frustration. That frustration creates doubt. Doubt creates inconsistency. Discipline solves this problem by shifting attention away from immediate results and back toward process. A disciplined person understands that not every day will feel productive, but every day still matters. Missing one workout may seem small. Delaying one important task may seem harmless. Wasting one evening may feel insignificant. But life is shaped by patterns, not isolated moments. What you repeat becomes your identity. This is why discipline is deeply connected to self-image. Every promise you keep to yourself strengthens trust. Every promise you break weakens it. Over time, people either become someone they trust or someone they constantly disappoint. Self-trust is powerful because it affects every part of life. A person who trusts themselves moves differently. They make decisions faster. They recover from setbacks better. They are less shaken by temporary failure because they know they can depend on their own effort. Discipline also creates emotional stability. Life becomes less chaotic when you stop reacting to every mood. Structure protects your mind. It gives you something solid when emotions become unpredictable. This matters because difficult goals always involve emotional swings. There will be days when you feel strong and days when you feel empty. There will be progress and setbacks. There will be moments when effort feels invisible. Discipline keeps you moving through all of it. For example, think about someone preparing for a competitive exam while also managing family pressure and financial stress. Motivation may help in the beginning, but after weeks of fatigue, stress, and slow progress, motivation alone will fail. The person who succeeds is often the one who follows a daily study structure, protects their time, reviews mistakes, and keeps showing up even when the results are not immediate. Discipline turns effort into eventual performance. Another example is someone trying to rebuild their life after losing income or facing failure in business. Emotionally, they may feel embarrassed, anxious, or defeated. Without discipline, these feelings can create paralysis. But if they build structure again, through waking on time, learning new skills, applying consistently, reducing distractions, and maintaining health, they slowly rebuild control. Progress may be slow, but discipline prevents collapse. One of the biggest lies people tell themselves is that they will become disciplined later. They imagine that once life improves, they will become focused. But discipline is not the result of success. It is often the cause of it. You build discipline before life becomes easier. This requires honesty. You must notice where you are leaking energy. You must identify the habits that weaken your future. This includes distractions that feel harmless, but quietly destroy momentum. Endless scrolling, constant comparison, poor sleep, emotional spending, avoiding difficult conversations, overthinking instead of acting. Discipline is not about becoming rigid or joyless. It is about becoming intentional. It means choosing what matters more than what feels easy. That choice becomes more important when nobody is watching. Private behavior creates public results. The habits you repeat in silence shape the life others eventually see. Success often looks sudden from the outside because people only notice outcomes. They do not see the years of invisible discipline that created them. There will be seasons when discipline feels lonely. You may have to say no to things others enjoy. You may have to protect your time when people do not understand your priorities. You may have to keep working while others are relaxing. This can feel unfair. But discipline is not about proving something to others. It is about becoming the kind of person who can carry the weight of their own ambition. Big goals require emotional strength. Emotional strength requires structure. Structure requires discipline. Without discipline, vision remains entertainment. With discipline, vision becomes direction. And direction, repeated daily, becomes reality. The impossible often does not require magic. It requires a person who is willing to keep going long after excitement. Chapter 4. Failure is not the end. It is often the beginning of clarity. One of the biggest reasons people never pursue difficult goals is their fear of failure. Not because failure itself is always destructive, but because people attach meaning to it too quickly. They treat setbacks as verdicts instead of information. They assume that one mistake, one rejection, one loss, or one bad season defines who they are and what they are capable of becoming. This belief destroys more dreams than lack of talent ever could. Failure is painful because it confronts identity. It exposes weak areas. It interrupts plans. It forces people to face uncertainty. It can affect confidence, relationships, finances, and emotional stability. That pain is real. Ignoring it does not make a person stronger, but misunderstanding failure can keep a person trapped for years. Most people are taught to fear failure from an early age. They are rewarded for getting things right and embarrassed when they make mistakes. Over time, many begin to associate error with shame. This creates a mindset where safety feels more attractive than growth. But growth has always required friction. A person who wants an extraordinary life must eventually develop a new relationship with failure. They must stop seeing it as proof of inadequacy and start seeing it as part of the cost of learning. This does not mean glorifying mistakes or pretending loss does not matter. It means refusing to allow pain to become identity. Failure often reveals what comfort hides. It shows where your systems were weak. It shows what skills were missing. It shows what assumptions were false. It shows what habits were unsustainable. It removes illusions. Clarity is one of the hidden gifts inside disappointment. When things go well, people often become careless. Success can hide flaws because momentum covers mistakes. Failure removes that cover. It forces honesty. That honesty can become one of the most powerful turning points in a person's life. The first response to failure matters. Many people react emotionally and make the situation worse. They isolate. They avoid responsibility. They blame others. They numb themselves with distractions. They become bitter. They stop trying because they want to protect themselves from more pain. This response feels understandable, but it creates a second failure that is more damaging than the first. The first failure is the event. The second failure is what happens when a person gives up on growth. Resilient people respond differently. They allow themselves to feel disappointment, but they do not stay there. They reflect honestly. They study what happened. They identify what was in their control and what was not. They make adjustments. They return stronger. This process is difficult because failure often attacks confidence. Confidence after failure is not rebuilt through positive thinking alone. It is rebuilt through action, through small consistent wins, through structure, through keeping promises again, through doing what you said you would do, even when you feel discouraged. This is why recovery matters more than perfection. Anyone can feel powerful when life is going well. Character is revealed in recovery. Recovery is rarely dramatic. It is usually quiet. It looks like waking up when you do not feel like it. It looks like showing up after embarrassment. It looks like trying again when your pride is hurt. It looks like rebuilding routine after emotional exhaustion. This process is slow, but it changes a person at a deeper level than easy success ever could. For example, think of a student who fails an important exam after months of preparation. At first, the result feels crushing. They may feel ashamed, especially if others expected them to succeed. But if they use the setback to understand where their preparation failed, whether in time management, consistency, technique, or emotional control, the next attempt becomes more intelligent. The pain becomes instruction. The second effort is no longer based on hope alone. It is based on clarity. Another example is someone whose business or job path collapses unexpectedly. They may lose money, confidence, and status. In the beginning, it may feel like everything they built was wasted. But if they use that season to understand market reality, improve decision-making, build patience, and strengthen resilience, that collapse can become the foundation for better future choices. The failure may still hurt, but it no longer controls the future. One of the most dangerous effects of failure is the story people tell themselves afterward. A setback happens, and the mind begins creating identity statements. I always mess things up. I am not capable. People like me do not succeed. It is too late now. These thoughts feel true because pain makes them feel heavy. But they are not facts. They are emotional reactions. If repeated long enough, they become beliefs that quietly sabotage future effort. This is why protecting your mind after failure is essential. You must separate what happened from who you are. A failed attempt means a strategy failed. It does not automatically mean you are incapable. A loss means something went wrong. It does not mean your future has ended. A rejection means one door closed. It does not mean all paths are gone. This mindset is not denial. It is strength. People who eventually achieve meaningful things are often not the ones who avoided failure. They are the ones who learned how to survive it without becoming smaller. Failure can either shrink your identity or expand it. If you avoid reflection, it becomes trauma. If you face it honestly, it becomes wisdom. There is a kind of strength that only comes from surviving what you once thought would break you. That strength changes how you move through life. You stop fearing difficulty the same way because you know you can endure more than you once believed. You become less dependent on easy outcomes. You become calmer under pressure. You become harder to shake. This is why some of the strongest people are not those who have had the easiest journeys. They are the ones who have rebuilt themselves again and again. The impossible is rarely achieved by people who never fail. It is usually achieved by people who refuse to let failure become final. Because sometimes what feels like the end is simply the moment life forces you to stop pretending and start becoming the person your goal. Chapter 5. your environment quietly shapes the size of your life. Many people believe success or failure is only about personal willpower. They think that if someone wants something badly enough, they will simply make it happen. While effort matters deeply, this view ignores one of the most powerful forces in human behavior: environment. Your environment influences your habits, your standards, your energy, your confidence, and even your sense of what is possible. It shapes what feels normal. It affects what you tolerate. It decides what distractions are always within reach and what opportunities feel visible. This is why some people keep working hard but still feel stuck. They are trying to grow in spaces that constantly pull them backward. Environment is not only physical. It is also emotional, social, and mental. Your room affects your focus. Your daily schedule affects your discipline. The people around you affect your beliefs. The content you consume affects your expectations. The conversations you repeat affect your identity. Most people underestimate how much they are absorbing every day. If you are constantly around people who complain, avoid responsibility, make excuses, and mock ambition, over time that energy enters you. Even if you resist it consciously, repeated exposure shapes what feels acceptable. If you are surrounded by chaos, noise, emotional instability, and poor habits, your mind has to spend energy surviving instead of growing. This does not mean a person cannot rise from a difficult environment. Many do. But it does mean they often have to become intentional much earlier than others. One of the first signs of maturity is understanding that your future cannot be built in spaces that continuously weaken your standards. This truth can be uncomfortable because environment often includes people you care about. Friends, family, coworkers, social circles, even communities that feel familiar. But familiar is not always healthy. Sometimes people keep relationships that are slowly damaging their growth because they fear being misunderstood or alone. They stay in conversations that drain them. They tolerate habits that make them smaller. They remain in routines that make their goals impossible. Comfort can become a trap when it protects stagnation. A person who wants to achieve something meaningful must learn to protect their mind like an asset. This means becoming selective. Selective about who gets access to your energy. Selective about what you watch and absorb. Selective about what routines you repeat. Selective about what standards you allow around you. This is not arrogance. It is responsibility. Because your environment is always training you into something. It is either training you to become stronger, more focused, and more disciplined, or it is training you to become distracted, reactive, and average. There is no neutral exposure over long periods. This is especially important during the early stages of growth. In the beginning, ambition is fragile. New habits are weak. Confidence is still forming. At that stage, environment matters even more because one discouraging voice can weaken momentum. This is why protecting early progress matters. A person who is trying to change must create conditions that support consistency. That may mean building a cleaner workspace, creating fixed hours for study or work, reducing unnecessary phone use, sleeping at better times, spending less time with people who constantly create emotional noise, listening to voices that expand your thinking instead of shrinking it. Small changes in environment often create large changes in behavior because they reduce friction. For example, someone trying to build a study habit in a noisy, distracted home may struggle for months and blame themselves. But when they begin studying in a library, create a fixed schedule, and remove their phone during work sessions, their consistency improves. Their ability was never the issue. Their environment was constantly interrupting their focus. Another example is someone trying to improve emotionally while staying surrounded by people who normalize negativity and self-sabotage. Every time they try to grow, they are pulled back into old patterns. But when they begin setting boundaries, reducing toxic exposure, and seeking healthier influences, their emotional stability improves. Their growth accelerates because their environment stops fighting their goals. One of the most powerful things you can do is audit your life honestly. Ask yourself, what in my daily environment is making me weaker? What habits are being encouraged around me? What patterns keep repeating? What spaces make me feel focused and clear? Who around me brings out my discipline, and who feeds my excuses? These questions are important because many people think they need more motivation when what they actually need is better structure. The wrong environment makes discipline feel exhausting. The right environment makes discipline feel natural. This does not mean you must wait until life becomes ideal before you act. Often you must begin with what you have. But even in difficult circumstances, you can still make meaningful adjustments. You can protect your mornings. You can reduce digital noise. You can create private routines. You can limit certain conversations. You can build standards that do not depend on the people around you. These decisions matter because repeated exposure becomes identity. Over time, the life around you becomes the life within you. That is why serious growth often requires distance. Distance from habits that weaken you. Distance from distractions that waste you. Distance from voices that keep you afraid. Distance from environments that reward mediocrity. This distance may feel uncomfortable at first, but growth often begins when comfort loses its authority. The impossible is not reached only through effort. It is reached when effort is protected. Protected by standards. Protected by discipline. Protected by an environment that allows your future self to breathe. Because the truth is simple. You cannot consistently build a powerful life while remaining loyal to everything that keeps you small. Chapter 6. Patience is not waiting, it is enduring without losing direction. One of the hardest parts of pursuing something meaningful is not starting. It is continuing when nothing seems to be happening. Many people can begin with excitement. Few can remain steady when progress is slow, invisible, or uncertain. This is where patience becomes essential. Most people misunderstand patience. They think patience means passive waiting. They imagine it as sitting still until life improves. But real patience is active. It is disciplined endurance. It is the ability to keep doing what matters without immediate reward. Patience is one of the deepest tests of character because it reveals what a person truly believes. Anyone can say they want success. Anyone can feel motivated at the beginning. But when effort stretches across months or years without visible payoff, desire is tested. At that stage, many people begin to doubt themselves, question the process, and compare their pace to others. Comparison is one of the fastest ways to destroy patience. A person sees someone else moving faster, achieving sooner, receiving recognition earlier, and they begin to feel behind. They start assuming their slow progress means they are failing. This belief is dangerous because it confuses speed with value. Not all growth is visible at the same pace. Some progress happens internally long before it shows externally. Confidence develops before results appear. Skill improves before recognition comes. Discipline strengthens before opportunity arrives. Character deepens before success becomes public. This hidden phase is where patience. A person who gives up too early often does not fail because they lacked potential. They fail because they could not tolerate the silence between effort and reward. That silence can feel brutal. You may work hard and see little return. You may improve and still feel unseen. You may stay consistent while others seem to move ahead faster. You may make sacrifices that nobody notices. These seasons can make you question whether your effort is worth it. This is where many people drift. Not because they are lazy, but because uncertainty wears them down. The mind wants proof. It wants reassurance that the work matters. It wants signs that the pain has purpose. But meaningful goals rarely give constant reassurance. Sometimes the process gives nothing except the chance to continue. That is why patience is not weakness. It is emotional strength. Patience means trusting that repeated effort has value even before visible evidence appears. This trust is not blind. It is built on understanding how real progress works. A tree does not become strong because of one day of sunlight. It grows through seasons. Roots develop underground long before branches are visible. Human growth often works the same way. The habits you are building now may feel unnoticed, but they are creating future capacity. The routines you protect now may feel ordinary, but they are shaping your standards. The small choices you repeat now may feel insignificant, but they are quietly building identity. Patience helps you respect process instead of chasing constant emotional reward. This matters because people who depend on quick results often become unstable. They change goals too quickly. They quit when discomfort lasts. They mistake slow progress for no progress. They keep restarting and wonder why nothing changes. In reality, constant restarting is often more damaging than slow movement. Consistency compounds. Small effort repeated long enough becomes powerful. This is true in health, learning, business, recovery, relationships, and self-mastery. For example, consider someone trying to learn a difficult skill, such as speaking a new language or mastering a technical profession. In the beginning, progress feels frustrating. They may feel slow, confused, and discouraged. But if they continue practicing every day, even imperfectly, they begin to notice small improvements. Over time, those small improvements become fluency, confidence, and competence. The breakthrough often feels sudden, but it was built slowly. Another example is a person rebuilding emotional stability after a painful loss. Healing may feel invisible for months. Some days may feel worse than others. But through routine, reflection, support, and time, their inner strength returns. They may not notice it daily, but one day they realize that what once controlled them no longer has the same power. Healing happened slowly, but it happened. Patience also protects you from emotional extremes. Without patience, people become reactive. They chase shortcuts. They force outcomes too early. They abandon process for temporary relief. They make desperate decisions because they cannot tolerate uncertainty. Patience creates steadiness. It allows you to stay clear when emotions fluctuate. It helps you avoid self-sabotage. It teaches you to separate temporary discomfort from long-term direction. This does not mean accepting a life with no urgency. Patience is not laziness. Patience still requires effort. It still requires discipline. It still requires honesty. Patience is not sitting still and hoping. It is moving forward without demanding instant proof. That distinction changes everything. Some seasons of life will feel unfair. You may give more than you receive. You may work hard and feel forgotten. You may do the right thing and still face setbacks. These moments test whether your commitment is based on values or convenience. If your commitment depends only on easy progress, it will collapse. But if your commitment is rooted in purpose, patience becomes possible. You begin to understand that delay is not always denial. Sometimes life is building your capacity before handing you what you asked for. Sometimes the process is protecting you from receiving something before you are ready to carry it. Sometimes the delay is not punishment. It is preparation. The impossible often takes longer than expected. Not because it is unreachable, but because becoming the person capable of holding it takes time. Time tests everyone. Patience separates those who dream briefly from those who build deeply. Because in the end, the people who achieve extraordinary things are often not the fastest. They are the ones who stayed when others got tired. Chapter 7. The version of you that wants more must learn to let go. Every meaningful transformation requires loss. This is one of the hardest truths to accept, because people often want a bigger life without releasing the habits, identities, comforts, and attachments that belong to their smaller one. They want growth without sacrifice. They want change without grief. They want expansion while holding tightly to everything familiar. But life does not work that way. To become someone new, something old must end. This does not always mean dramatic endings. Often, the most important things you must let go of are internal. Old stories, old excuses, old fears, old emotional dependencies, old patterns of avoidance, old versions of yourself that once helped you survive, but now prevent you from growing. Many people stay trapped, not because they lack ability, but because they remain emotionally loyal to a past version of themselves. That version may be the person who always played safe. The person who stayed quiet to avoid rejection. The person who settled for approval. The person who made excuses because trying felt dangerous. The person who kept delaying because comfort was easier than change. These identities can become deeply familiar. Even when they are painful, they feel known. And what is known often feels safer than what is possible. This is why growth can feel like grief. Not because you are losing something bad, but because you are losing something familiar. You may outgrow people. You may outgrow routines. You may outgrow ways of thinking that once protected you. You may outgrow the emotional patterns that helped you cope in difficult seasons. This process can feel lonely because not everyone will understand your changes. Some people will resist your growth because your change forces them to face their own stagnation. Others may feel uncomfortable because your standards are no longer easy to access. Some may accuse you of changing as if growth is betrayal. But growth is not betrayal. Staying trapped to keep others comfortable is. A person who wants an extraordinary life must eventually accept that not everyone can come with them into their next chapter. This is painful, but necessary. Because your future cannot be built while you are still negotiating with the habits that are destroying it. Letting go is not only about removing what is harmful. It is also about releasing what is no longer aligned. This includes goals that no longer fit. Dreams that belong to an older version of you. Expectations built around pleasing others. Definitions of success that were never truly yours. Sometimes people chase things for years not because they want them, but because they are afraid of disappointing someone or admitting they need a new direction. This creates deep internal conflict. You can work hard and still feel empty if the life you are building is not honest. Real growth requires truth. You must ask yourself difficult questions. What part of me am I protecting that no longer serves me? What comfort am I defending at the cost of my future? What identity have I outgrown, but still perform? What fear keeps me attached to what is familiar? What would change if I stopped pretending? These questions are uncomfortable because they demand emotional courage. But without them, many people spend years achieving things that never make them feel whole. Letting go creates space. Space for better habits. Space for clearer thinking. Space for healthier relationships. Space for deeper peace. Space for stronger identity. You cannot build a full life in a crowded mind. The mind needs room to expand. This often means simplifying. Removing unnecessary noise. Reducing emotional clutter. walking away from constant distraction, creating boundaries, protecting peace, being willing to disappoint people who benefited from your lack of standards. This is strength. Not because it feels good, but because it protects what matters. For example, consider someone who has always been known as the reliable person who says yes to everyone. They help constantly, avoid conflict, and neglect their own goals to maintain approval. Over time, they feel drained and resentful. Their dreams remain untouched because their energy belongs to everyone else. Growth for this person may require learning to say no, setting boundaries, and accepting temporary discomfort in exchange for long-term self-respect. The loss of constant approval creates space for a more honest life. Another example is someone who has failed in the past and now secretly lives inside that memory. Even if life offers new chances, they hesitate because they are still emotionally attached to who they were during that painful season. Letting go for them means releasing shame, forgiving themselves, and refusing to let an old chapter define current potential. That release becomes the beginning of confidence. Letting go also includes surrendering the need to control everything. This is difficult for ambitious people. When you care deeply, you want certainty. You want guarantees. You want outcomes to match effort. But life often asks you to release control over timing, recognition, and results. You can control effort. You can control standards. You can control integrity. But you cannot force life to unfold exactly how you imagined. Learning to release this need for control creates peace. It helps you stay grounded. It protects you from emotional collapse when things take longer than expected. It teaches you that strength is not only in holding on. Sometimes strength is in knowing what to release. The impossible often requires more than hard work. It requires emotional courage. The courage to release what is comfortable but limiting. The courage to leave what is familiar but small. The courage to become misunderstood for a season while building something real. Because the truth is this: you cannot carry your future with full strength while dragging the weight of everything you should have left behind. At some point, the life you want begins on the other side of what you are finally willing to release. Chapter 8. Your mind becomes the world. You rehearse every day. Long before people change their circumstances, they usually live inside repeated mental patterns that either strengthen or weaken their future. The mind is not just a place where thoughts happen. It is a training ground. What you repeatedly think, imagine, fear, avoid, and focus on begins shaping how you act, what you expect, and what kind of life feels possible. This is why two people can face similar circumstances and respond in completely different ways. One sees challenge and slowly builds strength. The other sees difficulty and becomes overwhelmed. The difference is often not the situation itself. It is the meaning their mind has been practicing. Your mind believes what you repeat. This is true, whether what you repeat is helpful or destructive. If you constantly rehearse fear, failure, rejection, and worst-case scenarios, your body begins reacting as if danger is always near. You hesitate more. You overthink more. You avoid more. You become emotionally tired before anything even happens. If you constantly rehearse excuses, your brain begins protecting comfort as if comfort is survival. If you constantly rehearse self-doubt, comparison, and regret, your confidence weakens long before real effort begins. This is why many people feel exhausted, even when they have done very little. Their mind has been running stress without movement. Mental rehearsal is powerful because the brain responds strongly to repeated focus. What you think about consistently becomes familiar. What becomes familiar feels true. This can either become your greatest advantage or your biggest prison. A person who wants to achieve something difficult must become aware of their internal dialogue. Not every thought deserves trust. Not every fear deserves obedience. Not every emotional reaction deserves action. The mind produces noise. Some of it is useful. Much of it is protective, repetitive, and outdated. Growth begins when you stop assuming every thought is wisdom. Many people live inside automatic patterns without questioning them. They wake up already expecting stress. They assume rejection before trying. They imagine failure before effort. They talk themselves out of progress before they begin. This creates invisible resistance. A person may want change, but their mind has already rehearsed defeat so many times that their body resists effort. This is why mindset work is practical, not abstract. It affects energy. It affects focus. It affects emotional recovery. It affects whether you keep going when difficulty appears. Training your mind does not mean pretending negative thoughts do not exist. It means developing the ability to notice them without becoming controlled by them. This requires attention. You must start listening to how you speak to yourself when things go wrong. Do you collapse into shame? Do you exaggerate setbacks? Do you assume one bad day means failure? Do you speak to yourself in ways you would never speak to someone you care about? Many people are carrying years of internal criticism, so normalized that they do not even notice it anymore. That voice may sound like realism, but often it is just fear repeated long enough to feel true. To change your life, you must change the quality of your inner environment. That starts with awareness. Awareness of what you consume. Awareness of what you dwell on. Awareness of what stories you keep repeating. Awareness of the emotional habits that quietly weaken your identity. Once you notice these patterns, you can interrupt them. You can replace helplessness with responsibility. You can replace panic with structure. You can replace self-attack with honesty. You can replace mental chaos with intention. This is not instant. Just like physical habits, mental habits change through repetition. Every day you practice a way of thinking, you strengthen that pathway. This is why small daily mental disciplines matter. Protecting your mornings. Reducing noise. Spending time in reflection. Writing clearly. Being careful about what enters your mind through media and conversation. Returning your attention to what is in your control. These things seem simple, but over time, they reshape emotional resilience. For example, consider someone who wants to rebuild confidence after repeated rejection. If every rejection becomes proof that they are not enough, they will slowly stop trying. But if they learn to interpret rejection as part of process rather than identity, they protect their emotional stability. Over time, their willingness to continue creates opportunities that fear would have prevented. Another example is someone facing financial pressure and uncertainty. If they spend every day mentally rehearsing disaster, they may become frozen and emotionally exhausted. But if they train themselves to focus on immediate action, daily structure, and controllable steps, their anxiety becomes more manageable. Their situation may still be hard, but their mind becomes a source of stability instead of additional pressure. One of the greatest forms of power is attention. Where your attention goes, your emotional life follows. If your attention lives in comparison, you will feel behind. If your attention lives in fear, you will feel threatened. If your attention lives in the past, you will feel trapped. If your attention lives in purpose, process, and values, you will become steadier. This is not about avoiding reality. It is about choosing what deserves mental space. Because attention is energy. And energy directed consistently creates results. The impossible often feels impossible first in the mind. Before the world resists you, your thoughts often will. That is why mental strength matters. Not because it makes life easy, but because it helps you keep moving when life becomes uncertain. Your mind is either becoming your strongest ally or your quietest enemy. The life you build outside will eventually reflect what you have been practicing inside. Because in the end, the future rarely belongs to the person with the biggest dream. It usually belongs to the person who trained their mind well enough to stay when Chapter 9. Consistency turns ordinary effort into extraordinary results. One of the most misunderstood truths about success is that extraordinary outcomes are often built through ordinary actions, repeated without drama. People are naturally drawn to intensity. They admire big moments, bold moves, visible breakthroughs, and sudden transformation. But most lasting success is not built in dramatic moments. It is built in routine. Consistency is powerful because it compounds. A single day of effort may feel small. A week of effort may still feel insignificant. But months and years of repeated action create results that look impossible to people who only notice the outcome. This is why many people underestimate what they can become. They are too focused on the distance between where they are and where they want to be. That distance feels overwhelming, so they become discouraged. They want a leap when what they actually need is rhythm. Rhythm creates momentum. Momentum reduces resistance. Resistance is one of the biggest hidden battles in personal growth. Starting is hard. Restarting is harder. But continuing creates familiarity. The brain adapts to what is repeated. A difficult routine becomes manageable. A hard skill becomes natural. A painful conversation becomes easier. A disciplined schedule becomes identity. This is why consistency is more valuable than occasional intensity. Many people work hard in short bursts. They feel inspired for a few days. They make strong plans. They push themselves emotionally. Then something interrupts them. Stress appears. Mood changes. Results feel slow. And they stop. This cycle creates frustration because effort without continuity feels exhausting and unrewarding. The problem is not effort. The problem is instability. Inconsistent people often confuse effort with progress. They believe that because they tried hard sometimes, they should already be further ahead. But progress is not built on what you do occasionally. It is built on what you repeat. This truth applies to every part of life. Health improves through repeated care. Trust grows through repeated honesty. Skill develops through repeated practice. Confidence strengthens through repeated action. Peace grows through repeated boundaries. Character deepens through repeated integrity. Consistency is what makes change real. It is what transforms desire into evidence. One of the biggest reasons people struggle with consistency is that they make goals too emotional. They expect every day to feel meaningful. They want every effort to feel productive. They want motivation to stay high. This expectation is unrealistic. Many important days will feel ordinary. Some will feel boring. Some will feel frustrating. Some will feel invisible. Still, they matter. This is where maturity separates itself from impulse. Maturity understands that not every day needs to feel powerful to be valuable. A person who understands consistency stops chasing emotional highs. They begin protecting systems instead. They make effort less negotiable. They create routines that reduce excuses. They understand that discipline repeated calmly is more powerful than occasional emotional force. This also requires patience with identity. Many people quit because they still see themselves through their old patterns. They expect instant internal change. But identity shifts slowly. At first, you may still feel like someone who struggles. someone who procrastinates, someone who lacks confidence, someone who starts and stops. That feeling does not mean change is not happening. It often means the new version of you is still under construction. Consistency is what builds that version. Every time you repeat the right action, even imperfectly, you cast a vote for the person you are becoming. That is how change becomes permanent. Not through one breakthrough, through repeated proof. For example, consider someone trying to build a writing habit or creative skill. At first, progress feels slow. The work may feel average. Improvement may be difficult to notice. But if they write daily, reflect, and continue learning, their ability compounds. Months later, their clarity, confidence, and quality become stronger. The difference was not talent appearing suddenly. It was consistency doing its quiet work. Another example is someone trying to repair trust in a damaged relationship or rebuild trust in themselves after years of broken promises. Trust does not return through one apology or one good day. It returns through repeated honesty, repeated effort, repeated emotional responsibility. Small actions done consistently create safety again. That safety creates healing. Consistency also protects you from emotional chaos. When your life has structure, bad days become less destructive. Without consistency, one setback can break momentum. With consistency, one bad day becomes a moment, not an identity. This matters because life will interrupt you. There will be illness, stress, unexpected loss, fatigue, disappointment. No one escapes difficulty. But consistent people recover faster because they have built a base. Their routines become something to return to. Their standards give them direction when emotions are unstable. This is why consistency is not glamorous, but deeply powerful. It creates quiet strength. It creates trust. It creates resilience. It makes impossible goals less intimidating because they are broken into daily proof. You stop needing to believe in some distant future version of yourself. You begin trusting the version you are becoming now. The impossible often does not require extraordinary talent. It requires someone willing to do ordinary things long enough for them to become extraordinary. Because in the end, people are rarely changed by what they do once. They are changed by what they refuse. Chapter 10. Pain is not the enemy. It is the price of expansion. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid pain, believing that a good life is a life with less discomfort. This belief feels logical because pain is unpleasant. It disrupts comfort, creates emotional disturbance, and challenges stability. But when it comes to growth, avoidance of pain often becomes the very reason people stay stuck. Pain is not always a signal of danger. In many cases, it is a signal of expansion. Whenever a person grows beyond their current level, they experience discomfort. This discomfort appears in different forms. Mental strain when learning something new. Emotional pressure when facing uncertainty. Physical fatigue when building discipline. Social discomfort when changing habits or setting boundaries. These experiences feel uncomfortable, but they are not signs that something is wrong. They are signs that something is changing. The problem is that most people misinterpret this signal. They assume discomfort means stop. But in reality, discomfort often means continue carefully. This misunderstanding creates a pattern where people retreat right at the moment they are closest to growth. Every meaningful goal requires a period of discomfort. There is no exception to this. If you want to become stronger, your body must face resistance. If you want to become skilled, your mind must struggle through confusion. If you want to become disciplined, your habits must resist old impulses. If you want to become emotionally stable, you must face feelings you once avoided. If you want to build something meaningful, you must endure uncertainty. Pain is part of the transformation process, not a mistake in it. This is why avoiding pain often leads to stagnation. A person who constantly chooses comfort may feel safe in the short term, but over time, their life becomes smaller. Skills remain undeveloped. Opportunities are avoided. Confidence weakens. Fear increases because unfamiliar situations become more intimidating. Comfort that is never challenged slowly becomes limitation. This does not mean a person should seek suffering for no reason. It means they must stop treating discomfort as proof of failure. There is a difference between destructive pain and productive pain. Destructive pain comes from harmful situations, toxic environments, or unnecessary self-harm. Productive pain comes from growth, discipline, learning, and improvement. One drains you. The other builds you. The difficulty is that both can feel uncomfortable in the moment. That is why awareness matters. A person pursuing something meaningful must learn to distinguish between pain that signals danger and pain that signals progress. Most of the pain involved in growth is temporary. It exists during transition periods. When learning a skill, the early confusion feels overwhelming, but it reduces with practice. When building discipline, resisting old habits feels difficult, but it becomes easier with repetition. When facing fear, the first attempts feel intense, but exposure reduces emotional resistance. This is how expansion works. The mind stretches through repetition. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. What once felt impossible becomes normal. This process is uncomfortable, but it is also transformative. For example, consider someone starting a fitness journey after years of inactivity. The first few weeks feel physically painful. Muscles ache. Energy feels low. Motivation fluctuates. Many people quit at this stage because they interpret discomfort as a sign of incompatibility. But if they continue, the body adapts. Strength increases. Energy improves. The same activity that once felt difficult becomes part of their identity. Another example is someone trying to improve their communication or social confidence. At first, speaking clearly, expressing opinions, or interacting with unfamiliar people may feel uncomfortable. There is fear of judgment. There is hesitation. But with repeated exposure, confidence grows. What once felt emotionally painful becomes natural behavior. This is why pain is not the enemy of success. Misunderstanding pain is. Many people stop right before breakthrough because they assume difficulty means they are on the wrong path. But often, difficulty means they are on the right path and simply at the beginning stage. Growth always includes resistance. Without resistance, there is no transformation. The key is not to eliminate pain, but to learn how to move through it without losing direction. This requires emotional maturity. You must stop making decisions only based on comfort. You must stop treating discomfort as a stop sign. You must learn to stay steady, even when progress feels slow. This does not mean ignoring your limits. It means expanding them carefully through repeated effort. Pain also builds appreciation. People who achieve things through struggle often value them more deeply. They understand the cost. They understand the process. They understand the discipline it required. Easy success is often fragile. Hard-earned success is more stable because it is connected to identity. A person who has grown through difficulty does not easily return to old habits because they remember what it took to change. This memory becomes protection. It strengthens discipline. It reinforces commitment. It builds resilience. The impossible often requires a person to accept discomfort as part of the journey rather than a reason to abandon it. Because every time you avoid necessary pain, you also avoid necessary growth. And every time you move through it, you become someone stronger than you. Conclusion. The impossible becomes possible when you refuse to stop becoming. Every idea in this book leads to one simple truth. The life you call impossible is often not blocked by the world, but by the distance between who you are now and who you are willing to become. Thinking of the impossible is not about imagination alone. It is about responsibility. It is about understanding that your future is not something that arrives on its own. It is something that is built through decisions, habits, discipline, patience, and repeated action. You have seen how fear disguises itself as logic, how waiting destroys opportunity, how discipline shapes direction, how failure becomes feedback, how environment quietly programs behavior, how patience protects progress, how letting go creates space, how your mind rehearses your reality, how consistency compounds results, and how pain is often the price of expansion. None of these truths are abstract. They are practical laws of personal growth that operate in real life every day. The difference between people who stay stuck and people who move forward is rarely intelligence. It is not luck in most cases. It is not even talent at the beginning. It is the willingness to stay in the process long enough for change to become visible. Most people quit not because their dream was too big, but because the journey felt too slow. They expected transformation to feel immediate. When it did not, they interpreted delay as failure. And in that misunderstanding, they stopped building. But real change does not announce itself quickly. It develops quietly. It grows through repetition. It strengthens through resistance. It survives through consistency. It becomes visible only after it has already been built internally. This is why the most powerful shift a person can make is not external. It is internal. It is the decision to stop negotiating with fear, to stop waiting for perfect conditions, to stop treating discomfort as a signal to retreat, to stop living in preparation and start living in action. Your current situation is not your final definition. It is your starting point. And what you do from this point forward matters more than everything that came before it. You do not need a perfect plan to begin. You need commitment to continue. You do not need certainty to move. You need willingness. You do not need to feel ready. You need to become responsible for your direction. The impossible loses its power when you stop treating it as a fixed reality and start treating it as a process of becoming. Every chapter of this book has pointed to the same direction. Growth is not a moment. It is a pattern. It is built in silence. It is proven over time. It is strengthened through repetition. And it belongs to those who do not stop when it becomes difficult. There will always be reasons to delay. There will always be fear to manage. There will always be discomfort to face. There will always be uncertainty at the beginning of every meaningful journey. But there will also always be possibility for the person who continues. So the real question is not whether the impossible can be achieved. The real question is whether you are willing to become the kind of person who stays long enough to see it turn into reality. Because in the end, the impossible is not something you find. It is something you go and build. The end.
Kindly subscribe to my channel.